The stars looked different now. Commander Zethara pressed her webbed hand against the cool metal of the observation deck, watching the lights of New Geneva sparkle below. 3,000 years had passed since the last human ship left Earth, and the planet had flourished under Valthari care. The blue oceans belonged to her people, the Hydrozans. Their cities floated beneath the waves, connected by streams of light that pulsed with the rhythm of their collective heartbeat. On land, the insectoid Chittick had built towering hives that reached toward the sky, their chittering voices creating a constant hum of activity. Above them all, the energy beings called Luxari danced through the upper atmosphere, their forms shifting like living aurora. Earth was peaceful. Earth was prosperous. Earth was theirs. "Commander," a voice crackled through her communication implant. "Deep space monitoring has detected something unusual." Zethara's gill slits fluttered with annoyance. She had requested quiet time to review the morning reports. The archaeological teams working in the old human ruins had found another cache of their primitive technology. Nothing threatening, just curiosities from a dead civilization. "What kind of unusual?" she asked. "Ships, Commander. Large formations, moving at incredible speed toward our system." That got her attention. Zethara turned away from the window and activated the holographic display in her command center. The three-dimensional star map flickered to life, showing the outer edges of their solar system. "Show me," she commanded. The technician, a nervous young Chittick named Clickstar, manipulated the controls with his forearms. "Here, Commander. At first we thought it was a system error. The readings are impossible." Zethara studied the data stream, hundreds of objects, each one massive, moving in perfect formation. Their speed was beyond anything in the known galaxy. Even more disturbing, they were slowing down in a controlled manner, which meant they weren't asteroids or natural phenomena. "How long until they reach us?" "If they maintain current deceleration, 17 days, Commander." "Have you identified their origin?" Clickstar's compound eyes clicked nervously. "That's the strange part. The energy signatures match some of the artifacts in the human ruins. The computer keeps saying they're human ships, but that's impossible. Humans have been extinct for 3 millennia. Zethara felt a chill run through her amphibious body. She had studied human history as part of her archaeological training. They had been a violent, self-destructive species that had poisoned their own world before finally destroying themselves in a series of devastating wars. The Valthari had arrived to find a planet covered in ruins and radiation, with no living humans anywhere. "Run the analysis again," she ordered. "Check for errors in the sensor array." "Already done, Commander. Results are consistent." The holographic display updated, showing more detail about the approaching fleet. The ships were enormous, dwarfing anything the Valthari had ever built. Their design was sleek and predatory, like weapons crafted in the shape of vessels. "Send a message to High Command," Zethara said. "Priority Alpha. We may have a first contact situation." Within hours, the news had spread throughout the system. The Valthari High Council convened an emergency session, with representatives from all 3 species arguing about the proper response. Some wanted to prepare defenses. Others insisted on diplomatic outreach. A few suggested evacuation. Zethara found herself appointed as head of the investigation team. Her expertise in human archaeology made her the obvious choice, though she wished someone else had the responsibility. She spent the next 3 days diving deep into human records, searching for clues about where they might have gone. The official history taught that humans had destroyed themselves, but as she dug deeper into the archives, she found troubling gaps. There were references to Exodus ships in some of the older documents, mentions of colonial preparations, and deep space missions. Most interesting of all, she discovered records of something called Project Homecoming that had been classified at the highest levels of human government. "They didn't all die," she whispered to herself in the quiet of her research chamber. "Some of them left." The implications were staggering. If humans had survived somewhere in deep space, what had they been doing for 3,000 years? What had they become? On the 10th day, the approaching fleet sent its first transmission. The message was broadcast on all frequencies in perfect Velthari standard language. This is Admiral Sarah Chen Okafor of the Human Expeditionary Fleet. We are returning to our homeworld. Please respond. The voice was calm, professional, and utterly terrifying in its confidence. Zethara played the message 17 times, analyzing every inflection. The speaker sounded like someone who had never doubted they would succeed in whatever they set out to do. High Command debated for another full day before authorizing a response. The message they crafted was diplomatic, but firm. Welcome to the Yao Sol system. This planet is now home to 3 billion Velthari citizens. We are willing to discuss your intentions through proper diplomatic channels. The human reply came back within minutes. Understood. We request immediate meeting to discuss terms for transition of planetary administration. Time is limited. Transition of planetary administration? Counselor Vexrath, the senior Luxari representative, flickered with indignation. They speak as if this is already decided. Perhaps they don't understand the situation, suggested Chief Hive Mind Zaktor of the Chittik. They may believe Earth is still uninhabited. Zethara studied the tactical displays showing the human fleet's approach. The ships moved with mathematical precision, their formation never varying by so much as a meter. Whatever these humans had become during their long exile, they had clearly learned discipline. I recommend we agree to the meeting, she said, but we do it on our terms, in our space, with our security. The High Council agreed. They would send their finest diplomatic vessel to meet with a single human ship at the edge of the system. It would be a show of good faith while maintaining safe distance from Earth. As the diplomatic mission prepared to launch, Zethara reviewed everything they knew about human psychology and behavior. The old records painted them as emotional, unpredictable, prone to violence when threatened. But those records were 3,000 years old. Who knew what time and space had done to them? The night before the mission launched, she stood again, at her observation window, looking down at the lights of New Geneva. 3 billion souls lived on this world now. The Hydrozans had built underwater cities more beautiful than anything in their species' history. The Chittik had established hive complexes that hummed with productivity and joy. The Luxari had found peace in Earth's upper atmosphere, their energy forms dancing in patterns of pure art. This was their home now. They had made it bloom again after the humans had nearly destroyed it. Whatever these returning humans wanted, they would have to understand that Earth belonged to someone else now. The diplomatic ship launched at dawn, carrying Zethara and a carefully selected team of negotiators. They had 17 different strategies, prepared, from generous relocation offers to firm territorial negotiations. They expected to meet desperate refugees seeking shelter, perhaps a few thousand survivors in outdated ships. What they found waiting for them at the system's edge was something else entirely. The human ship was beautiful and terrible, like a work of art designed to kill. It dwarfed their diplomatic vessel, its hull seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it. Strange energy patterns rippled across its surface, suggesting technology far beyond Velthari understanding. As their ship approached, Zethara felt a growing sense of unease. The humans had been gone for 3,000 years. What had they been doing all this time? She was about to find out. The docking process took 3 hours. The human ship seemed to scan every molecule of the Velthari diplomatic vessel before allowing contact. When the airlocks finally opened, Zethara got her first look at what humans had become. Admiral Sarah Chen Okafor was tall, much taller than the historical record suggested humans should be. Her skin had a strange metallic sheen, and her eyes held flecks of silver that seemed to glow in the dim light. When she moved, it was with fluid grace that reminded Zethara of deep ocean predators. "Commander Zethara," the Admiral said, extending her hand in the ancient human gesture of greeting. "Thank you for meeting with us." Zethara reached out to accept the handshake, following the diplomatic protocols her team had researched. The moment their hands touched, she gasped. The human's grip was like holding a piece of industrial machinery. The hand felt solid as stone, yet warm and clearly alive. "Please be seated," Admiral Chen Okafor said, gesturing to the conference table her people had prepared. We have much to discuss. As the Vilthari delegation took their places, Zeth-Ara noticed more details about their hosts. The humans moved with perfect coordination, as if they shared some kind of invisible connection. Their clothing seemed to be made of material that shifted and flowed, adapting to their movements. Most unsettling of all, she could hear a faint, humming sound, as if each human carried some kind of power source inside their body. We understand you have made homes here during our absence, the Admiral began. This was not unexpected. 3,000 years is a long time. Yes, Zeth-Ara replied carefully. Earth has been our world for 70 generations. We have built cities, raised families, created art and culture. 3 billion of our people call this place home. Admiral Chen Okafor nodded thoughtfully. The archaeological reports we reviewed suggested as much. Your people have done remarkable work restoring the planet's ecosystem. We are genuinely grateful. The words were kind, but something in the Admiral's tone made Zeth-Ara's gills flutter nervously. It sounded like someone thanking caretakers who had looked after a house while the owners were away. However, the Admiral continued, we must now discuss the transition period. We are prepared to offer your people generous relocation packages to suitable worlds within your previous territory. Our xenobiological teams have identified 17 planets that would be ideal for Vilthari colonization. The conference room fell silent. Zeth-Ara felt her teammates' shock through their shared communication link. The human was talking about moving 3 billion people as if it were a simple logistical problem. Admiral, Zeth-Ara said carefully, I think there may be some misunderstanding. We are not temporary residents here. Earth is our legal home under galactic law. We have occupied it for 3 millennia. I understand your position, Admiral Chen Okafor replied, and we sympathize with it. But Earth was never abandoned by humanity. We left to grow stronger, with every intention of returning. Think of it as a very long military deployment. One of Zeth-Ara's advisors, a Chittic legal expert named Krelsen, leaned forward. Admiral, with respect, your species was declared extinct by the Galactic Council. Legal occupation of abandoned worlds is recognized throughout civilized space. Something changed in Admiral Chen Okafor's expression. The politeness remained, but underneath it, Zeth-Ara glimpsed something that made her blood run cold. The Galactic Council, the Admiral said softly, operates under the assumption that might makes right. They respect whoever has the strongest fleet and the most advanced weapons. Would you care to compare our current capabilities? Before anyone could answer, the Admiral gestured to one of her escorts. The human stepped forward, and Zeth-Ara finally got a good look at what 3,000 years had done to the species. The man was enormous, easily 7 feet tall, with muscles that seemed carved from granite. His skin had the same metallic sheen as the Admiral's, but more pronounced. When he moved to adjust a chair, the metal furniture crumpled like paper in his grip. Sergeant Torres, Admiral Chen Okafor said, please give our guests a demonstration of standard human physical capabilities. The sergeant picked up the solid metal conference table, which had to weigh at least 500 pounds, and lifted it over his head with one hand. He held it there for several seconds, not even breathing hard, then gently set it back down. Enhanced bone density, muscle fiber restructuring, and integrated nanotechnology, the Admiral explained casually. Every human now carries these modifications as standard. The sergeant here is actually below average for our current military standards. Zeth-Ara tried to process what she was seeing. These weren't the same species that had left Earth. Evolution, technology, or both had transformed them into something new. Your people have grown, she managed to say. We have adapted, Admiral Chen Okafor corrected. 3,000 years of colonizing high-gravity worlds, radiation-soaked systems, and hostile environments. Humanity faced a simple choice: evolve or die. We chose evolution. The Admiral activated a holographic display that showed star charts of the local galactic region. Dozens of systems were marked with human symbols, connected by lines indicating trade routes and military positions. We have colonized 47 star systems, she continued. Each world presented unique challenges that required specific adaptations. Desert worlds taught us to survive without water for months. Ice worlds enhanced our cold resistance and improved our metabolism. High radiation systems gave us immunity to energy that would kill most species. The display zoomed in on several worlds, showing massive cities and industrial complexes that dwarfed anything in Velthari space. Our smallest colony has a population of 50 million. Our largest holds over 1 billion. We have built an interstellar civilization that spans light years, with technology your people have never imagined. Krelson clicked his mandibles nervously. If you are so successful in space, why return to Earth? Surely you have worlds better suited to your enhanced physiology. Admiral Chen Okafor's expression softened slightly. Because this is home. Every human child learns about Earth in their first lessons. They learn about blue skies and green forests, about oceans full of life, and seasons that change with natural rhythm. We have built paradise among the stars, but paradise isn't home. She stood and walked to the view screen, looking out at Earth's blue marble hanging in space. We also carry a promise, she continued. When our ancestors left, they swore an oath that their children would return. That promise has been kept alive for 100 generations. We are here to fulfill it. And if we refuse to leave? Zethara asked, though she dreaded the answer. Admiral Chen Okafor turned back to them, and her expression was genuinely sad. Then you will learn why humanity survived when so many other species did not. We do not wish conflict, Commander. We have seen too much death in our long journey through the stars. But we will have our world back. She pressed a control on her wrist device, and the view screen changed to show the human fleet. Thousands of ships hung in space, each one bristling with weapons and technology that looked like pure energy given form. We give you 7 days to consider our offer, Admiral Chen Okafor said. Discuss it with your leaders. Review your options. We hope wisdom will prevail, but we are prepared for any outcome. The meeting ended in stunned silence. As the Velthari delegation prepared to leave, Zethara found herself studying the humans more carefully. They moved like dancers, spoke like poets, and radiated the quiet confidence of apex predators who had never known defeat. During the journey back to Earth, her team sat in shocked silence. Finally, Krelson spoke what they were all thinking. They're not the same species that left, he whispered. There's something new, something more. Zethara nodded, watching Earth grow larger on the view screen. 3 billion Velthari called that beautiful blue world home. But she was beginning to understand that they might be living in someone else's house. The humans had returned, and they were nothing like what anyone had expected. The Velthari High Council met in emergency session for 3 straight days. Representatives from all 3 species argued, planned, and prepared, while the human fleet waited at the edge of their system. Some called for immediate surrender. Others demanded they fight for their home. Zethara stood before the assembled leaders, delivering her report with growing dread. Every detail she had observed about the humans painted the same picture. They were dealing with beings far beyond their ability to resist. They are not refugees, she concluded. They are conquerors who have returned to claim their birthright. Every scan we have taken of their ships shows technology centuries beyond our understanding. Councillor Vexrath flickered with indignation. 3 billion citizens cannot simply be relocated because some enhanced humans have decided they want their old world back. The legal precedent is clear, Chief Hivemind Zaktor added. This world belongs to us now. We have invested 70 generations in its development. Zethara wanted to agree with them, but she had looked into Admiral Chen Okafor's eyes. Those were not the eyes of someone who would be swayed by legal arguments. I recommend we begin evacuation preparations while maintaining diplomatic contact, she said. These humans do not seem interested in genocide. They want the planet, not our deaths. The debate continued for hours, but it ended when the human fleet began to move. Long-range sensors detected the massive ships entering Earth's solar system in perfect formation. They moved slowly, deliberately, giving the Velthari time to track their approach. It was the movement of someone supremely confident in their superiority. Admiral Chen Okafor sent another message. "We are beginning orbital operations. Please, keep your ships clear of designated zones. We wish to avoid accidental conflict." Within 6 hours, the humans had established complete control of space around Earth. Their ships took positions at every major orbital point, creating a perfect sphere of military control. Any ship trying to leave the planet would have to pass through their perimeter, but they didn't fire a single shot. "It's a demonstration," Zathara realized, watching the tactical displays. "They're showing us they could destroy our orbital infrastructure anytime they choose, but they're choosing not to." The first human landing craft appeared 12 hours later. Unlike their massive warships, these vessels were smaller, more elegant. They descended toward Earth's surface like falling stars. Too fast and too graceful for any technology the Velthari understood. The Chittick tried to intercept them with ground-based defenses. Their missile systems locked onto the incoming craft and fired their most advanced weapons. Zathara watched in horror as the human ship simply absorbed the missile impacts without even slowing down. "Their hulls are adapting," the weapons officer reported in disbelief. "The armor is learning from each hit and becoming resistant." The landing craft touched down in 17 locations across Earth's surface. Each landing was followed by the emergence of human soldiers who moved with impossible speed and coordination. These weren't the enhanced specimens from the diplomatic meeting. These were something far more dangerous. Zathara got her first look at them through surveillance feeds from New Geneva. The humans wore armor that seemed to be alive, shifting and flowing as they moved. When they walked, the ground beneath their feet cracked from the impact. When they spoke, their voices carried for miles without technological amplification. "Terran Reclamation Corps, First Wave," their leader announced. "Beginning ecosystem restoration in designated zones. All civilian populations, please evacuate to safe distances." What followed was unlike anything in recorded history. The humans didn't destroy the Velthari cities. Instead, they began transforming the landscape around them. Massive machines emerged from their landing craft, devices that seemed to rewrite the basic rules of biology and chemistry. Forests that had been adapted for Chittick physiology began shifting back to their original Earth configurations. Hydrozan water treatment plants found their chemical processes reversed as the humans restored natural ocean chemistry. The very air began to change as atmospheric processors removed the modifications that had made Earth comfortable for alien lungs. "They're not just taking the planet," Chief Scientist Krillix reported in amazement. "They're changing it back to what it was before we arrived." The process was happening too fast for natural evolution. The humans had technology that could alter ecosystems on a planetary scale within hours. Plants withered and were replaced by new growth. Water composition shifted. Even the soil itself began changing color and texture. The Hydrozan resistance mounted their counterattack from the deep ocean trenches. Commander Zathara led the assault personally, bringing their most advanced underwater weapons against the human landing sites near the coastlines. They discovered that humans had anticipated this response. As Zathara's forces approached the first human position, they encountered soldiers who moved through the water like born predators. These humans had been modified for aquatic combat, with gill-like slits along their necks and webbed appendages that cut through water faster than Hydrozan swimmers. The battle was over in minutes. Human weapons fired energy beams that turned water into superheated plasma. Their armor let them dive to crushing depths where no Velthari could survive. Most terrifying of all, they fought with perfect coordination, as if they shared a single mind. "Fall back," Zathara ordered, watching her forces scatter before the human advance. "All units, fall back to deep positions." But there were no safe, deep positions. Human submersibles appeared at depths that should have been impossible, their hulls withstanding pressure that would crush any known material. They moved through the deepest trenches, like they owned them. High in the atmosphere, the Luxari faced their own nightmare. They had tried to use their energy manipulation abilities to disrupt human technology, confident that their mastery of electromagnetic forces would give them an advantage. Instead, they encountered humans who had learned to weaponize thought itself. The psychic battle created aurora displays visible from Earth's surface, as energy beings clashed with human minds that had been enhanced beyond normal limits. But the Luxari collective consciousness, which had always been their strength, became a weakness against opponents who could turn their shared thoughts into weapons. Within days, it was clear that resistance was hopeless. Every Vilthari strategy was anticipated, every weapon was countered, every defensive position was bypassed or overwhelmed, but the humans still weren't killing them. Civilian evacuation ships will be permitted to leave designated zones, Admiral Chen Okafor announced. Transport to our prepared relocation worlds will begin immediately. We recommend compliance for your own safety. The evacuation became a flood. Millions of Vilthari packed into ships, heading for the 17 worlds the humans had offered them. Those who remained found themselves living in increasingly alien environments as Earth's transformation continued. Zathara stood in her command center, watching her underwater city slowly become uninhabitable as the humans restored natural ocean chemistry. Her people were already beginning to suffer from the changed water composition. Soon they would have no choice but to leave. Commander, her communications officer called. We're receiving a personal message from Admiral Chen Okafor. The human appeared on the main screen, looking as calm and professional as ever. Commander Zathara, I understand you are leading the remaining resistance elements. I want to speak with you directly. What do you want to say? Zathara replied. That I respect your courage and your loyalty to your people. You have fought well for your home. But this battle cannot be won. Please consider the lives of those who follow you. Zathara stared at the human admiral, seeing genuine respect in those enhanced eyes. Why are you doing this? You could have destroyed us all from orbit. Why the slow conquest? Admiral Chen Okafor's expression softened slightly. Because we remember what it feels like to lose everything and start over. We remember the pain of leaving the only world we had ever known. We do not wish that suffering on others unnecessarily, but you'll inflict it anyway. Yes, the Admiral admitted, because this is our home, and we have waited 3,000 years to return to it. We will be as merciful as possible, but we will not be denied. The transmission ended, leaving Zathara alone with her thoughts. Around her, the last free Vilthari forces waited for orders that she knew would only lead to more death. The humans had returned. They were too strong to stop, and Earth belonged to them again. The siege of New Geneva began on the 15th day of human occupation. The great city stood as the last symbol of Vilthari civilization on Earth, its crystal spires reaching into the clouds above the ancient Swiss Alps. 50 million civilians, sheltered within its walls, along with the remaining military forces of all three species. Zathara stood on the command tower's observation deck, watching human forces surround the city. They moved with mechanical precision, establishing a perfect perimeter that sealed off every escape route. But they weren't attacking. They were waiting. What are they doing? Asked General Vokhtar, the Chittic military commander. His compound eyes tracked the human positions with growing frustration. Why don't they simply overwhelm us? Because they want something, Zathara replied, studying the human formations through her tactical scope. This isn't about conquest anymore. They could have taken the city by now. Her answer came 3 hours later when massive drilling equipment began emerging from human landing craft. The machines were unlike anything in Vilthari technology, boring into the earth with beams of energy that turned solid rock into vapor. They're digging, reported Chief Scientist Krillax, directly beneath the city center, going deeper than our foundations. The drilling continued for days. Human excavation teams worked around the clock, their enhanced bodies never seeming to tire. They dug with purpose, following some predetermined path that led straight down through layers of stone and metal. On the third day of digging, they found what they were looking for. Dr. Marcus Webb emerged from the excavation site like a man returning from prayer. The human archaeologist moved with reverent care as he supervised the removal of artifacts from deep beneath New Geneva's foundations. Admiral Chen Okafor arrived personally to oversee the operation. She stood at the edge of the dig site, watching, as her people brought up containers that glowed with soft internal light. The Genesis Archive, she announced over the communication channels, the cultural and genetic heritage of humanity, sealed away before our ancestors left Earth. Everything we were, everything we hope to become, stored in quantum crystal matrices that have waited 3,000 years for us to return. Zethara felt a chill run through her amphibious body. The humans hadn't just come back to reclaim their planet. They had come back to reclaim their souls. "Commander?" Admiral Chen Okafor's voice came through the communication system. "I request a meeting. There are things you need to understand." They met in the ruins of the old United Nations building, halfway between the human excavation site and the Valthari defensive perimeter. The symbolism wasn't lost on either of them. "Your city is built on our most sacred site," Admiral Chen Okafor explained, her enhanced features showing genuine emotion for the first time. "When our ancestors prepared for Exodus, they knew they might never return. So they buried everything that made us human beneath the ground, hoping that someday our children would come home and remember who they were." Zethara looked at the glowing containers arranged around them. "What's in there?" "Art, music, literature, philosophy. The genetic templates of every species that lived on Earth before the Great Dying. Mathematical proofs, scientific theories, and the dreams of a billion human minds. Everything we lost when we left, everything we've spent 3,000 years trying to recreate." Dr. Webb approached, carrying one of the smaller containers. "May I show you something, Commander?" At Zethara's nod, he activated the device, the air filled with music, hauntingly beautiful melodies that seemed to touch something deep in her consciousness. Images followed the sound: forests, oceans, animals that had died out millennia ago, children laughing under blue skies. "This is what Earth was," Dr. Webb said softly. "This is what we're trying to bring back." "And what about us?" Zethara asked. "What about the 50 million people in that city?" Admiral Chen Okafor's expression hardened. "They cannot stay. I'm sorry, but that's not negotiable. However, their removal need not be violent." That's when the demonstration began. High above Earth, something ignited in the outer solar system. Jupiter, the great gas giant, began to glow with new light. The glow grew brighter and brighter until it became a second sun, casting shadows across Earth's surface in broad daylight. "Stellar engineering," Admiral Chen Okafor said calmly, watching Zethara's horrified expression. "We're converting Jupiter's atmosphere into a temporary fusion reaction. Don't worry, it will burn out in a few hours. But the process demonstrates our capabilities." Zethara stared at the new sun blazing in the sky. These humans didn't just have advanced weapons. They had technology that could manipulate stars themselves. "Why show me this?" she whispered. "Because I want you to understand that resistance is not just futile, it's unnecessary. We don't want to destroy you. We want to give you something better than what you have here." The Admiral activated a holographic display showing the 17 worlds humans had prepared for Valthari relocation. Each planet had been carefully terraformed to match the specific needs of all three species. Ocean worlds for the Hydrozans, hive-ready continents for the Chittic, energy-rich atmospheres for the Luxari. "These worlds are not consolation prizes," Admiral Chen Okafor continued. "They are gifts. We have spent decades preparing them, using technology and resources that dwarf anything your people have ever possessed. Each world is better suited to your species than Earth ever was. Then why do you want Earth back?" "Because it's home," the Admiral replied simply. "Because our children dream of blue skies and natural forests. Because we made a promise 3,000 years ago and promises matter." The temporary star faded as Jupiter's atmospheric reaction burned out, but its message was clear. Humanity had become something that treated solar systems as construction projects. Inside New Geneva, the Valthari leadership finally faced the truth. Chief Hive Mind Zaktor was the first to speak the words no one wanted to hear. "We cannot win this war." "They turned a gas giant into a star," General Vaktar said, his voice hollow. "For a few hours just to make a point. What else can they do?" The answer came from their own intelligence reports. Human colonies throughout the galaxy had been sending ships toward Earth, carrying millions of settlers ready to rebuild their ancestral home. The fleet in orbit was just the advance force. The real colonization fleet was still coming. How many? Zethara asked. Conservative estimates suggest 200 million humans in the first wave, Krillix reported, with more following every year until the planet reaches its optimal carrying capacity. The numbers were overwhelming. Even if the Vilthari could somehow defeat the military forces, they would face an endless stream of human colonists, each one enhanced beyond natural limits, each one carrying technology that made Vilthari science look primitive. But the most devastating revelation came from the human archaeological teams. As they excavated the Genesis archive, they discovered that Earth's natural ecosystem under Vilthari management wasn't natural at all. They've been using our own restoration work against us, Dr. Webb announced. Every forest you replanted, every ocean you cleaned, every mountain you rebuilt. You were unknowingly following the original Earth template stored in the archive. You've been preparing our world for our return for 3,000 years. The irony was perfect and horrible. The Vilthari hadn't just been occupying Earth. They had been caretaking it, maintaining it exactly as humans would want it when they returned. As night fell over New Geneva, Zethara made her decision. She activated the emergency communication system and sent a message to all Vilthari forces. This is Commander Zethara. I am ordering a general ceasefire. All units, stand down and prepare for evacuation orders. The response was immediate and emotional. Some called her a traitor. Others begged her to reconsider, but most simply acknowledged the inevitable. Commander, Admiral Chen Okafor's voice came through the communication system. You have made the right choice. Have I? Zethara asked. Or have I just surrendered 3 billion people to exile? You have saved 3 billion lives, the Admiral replied, and given them a chance to build something new and better. That is the choice of a true leader. As the last human excavation teams emerged from beneath New Geneva, carrying the final containers of the Genesis archive, Zethara understood that this had always been inevitable. Earth belonged to humanity not because they were stronger, but because they had never truly left it behind. The archive contained their dreams, their hopes, and their unbreakable connection to the blue world that had given them birth. 3,000 years in exile had only made that connection stronger. The humans had returned. They had grown too strong to stop, and Earth was calling them home. The challenge came at dawn on the 20th day. Commander Zethara stood in the ruins of the old United Nations Plaza, watching the sun rise over a world that was no longer hers. Around her, the last Vilthari military units prepared for evacuation, while human restoration teams continued their work of reshaping the planet. I invoke the right of final contest, she announced, her voice carrying across the plaza through amplified speakers. Single combat between champions, with terms to be set by the outcome. The human response came within minutes. Admiral Chen Okafor herself appeared at the edge of the plaza, flanked by her enhanced soldiers. But she wasn't smiling. Commander, this is unnecessary, the Admiral said. The evacuation is proceeding smoothly. Your people are already establishing new homes on the worlds we've prepared. Why risk lives on ceremonial combat? Because my people need to see that we fought to the end, Zethara replied, and because I need to know if there's any chance, however small, that we might still call this world home. Admiral Chen Okafor studied her for a long moment. What are your proposed terms? If my champion wins, you withdraw your forces for 100 years, allowing us time to evacuate peacefully on our own terms. If your champion wins, we surrender immediately and accept your relocation program without further resistance. The Admiral nodded slowly. And who will serve as your champion? Zethara straightened her shoulders. I will. And ours will be Dr. Elena Vasquez, our chief xenobiologist. The choice surprised everyone, including Zethara. She had expected to face one of the massive Void Marines or enhanced soldiers. Instead, the humans had chosen a woman who appeared to be an ordinary scientist. Dr. Vasquez approached across the plaza, moving with the same fluid grace all humans now possessed, but showing none of the obvious physical enhancements of the soldiers. She was tall but not gigantic, strong but not obviously superhuman. When she spoke, her voice was gentle and kind. "Commander Zethara, I want you to know that I respect your courage. You fought well for your people." "As have you, Doctor," Zethara replied. "Shall we begin?" The combat area was cleared in the center of the plaza, with representatives from all three Valthari species watching from safe distances. Human recording devices captured every moment, while Valthari communication networks carried the event live to their evacuation ships. "Traditional combat rules," Admiral Chen Okafor announced. "Hand-to-hand only. No technological enhancements beyond those that are part of your natural biology. Combat continues until one participant yields or is incapacitated." Zethara activated her species' natural bioelectric abilities. Feeling power surge through her amphibious body, electric arcs danced between her webbed fingers as she prepared to strike. Her people were natural warriors, adapted for underwater combat and electrical discharge. Dr. Vasquez simply stood there, hands at her sides, watching with calm interest. Zethara struck first, moving with the lightning speed of a deep-ocean predator. Her electric discharge would have stunned any Valthari opponent, but Dr. Vasquez simply absorbed the energy, her skin glowing briefly as it dissipated the electrical attack. "Radiation resistance," the doctor explained conversationally, dodging Zethara's follow-up strike with minimal effort. 3,000 years of colonizing systems with unstable stars tends to select for energy absorption capabilities. Zethara pressed her attack, using her aquatic adapted physiology to flow around the human's defenses. But Dr. Vasquez moved like water herself, always one step ahead of every strike. "Your combat form is impressive," Dr. Vasquez continued, catching Zethara's wrist in mid-strike and gently redirecting the attack. "Hydrozan fighting techniques are perfectly adapted for three-dimensional underwater combat. Unfortunately, we've had to develop similar skills for zero-gravity environments." The human scientist began her own offensive, and Zethara realized with growing horror that she was completely outmatched. Dr. Vasquez fought with perfect efficiency, never using more force than necessary, never moving faster than required. Every motion was calculated, every strike precisely placed to disable rather than destroy. "Enhanced reflexes from high-gravity world adaptation," Dr. Vasquez explained as she avoided another of Zethara's electrical attacks. "Improved bone density from low-oxygen environments. Muscle fiber enhancement from worlds where everything tries to kill you." Zethara found herself being systematically dismantled by someone who was giving her a biology lesson while defeating her in combat. The human wasn't even breathing hard. "The interesting thing about human evolution over the past 3 millennia," Dr. Vasquez continued, blocking a desperate strike and responding with a gentle tap that sent Zethara stumbling, "is that we didn't just adapt to individual challenges. We learned to adapt to adaptation itself." The final exchange was brief. Zethara gathered all her remaining strength for one last attack, channeling every volt of bioelectricity her body could produce. The discharge was powerful enough to kill most living beings. Dr. Vasquez caught the electrical blast in her bare hands, absorbed it completely, then redirected it harmlessly into the ground. In the same fluid motion, she stepped forward and placed her hand gently on Zethara's shoulder. The touch was enough. Zethara felt her legs give way as every muscle in her body went limp. She collapsed to her knees not from injury, but from the overwhelming realization of just how completely she had been outmatched. "Neural pathway mapping," Dr. Vasquez explained softly, kneeling beside her. "Non-lethal pressure point manipulation, adapted from encounters with 17 different hostile species. You're not hurt, just temporarily immobilized." Zethara looked up at the human scientist, seeing genuine compassion in those enhanced eyes. "Why?" she whispered. "Why show me this?" "Because you needed to understand," Dr. Vasquez replied. "Every human carries these abilities now, not just our soldiers, not just our enhanced troops. Every one of us. We didn't just grow stronger during our exile, Commander. We grew beyond what we used to be." As feeling returned to her limbs, Zethara struggled to sit up. Around the plaza she could see the shocked expressions of her people. They had watched their finest warrior defeated by a human scientist who had barely exerted herself. Your people fought bravely, Dr. Vasquez continued, helping Zathara to her feet. You adapted well to this world and built something beautiful here, but adaptation is what humans do best. It's what we've always done best. We adapt, we overcome, and we survive. Admiral Chen Okafor approached, her expression serious but not unkind. The terms of combat have been met. Do you yield, Commander? Zathara looked around the plaza one last time, seeing the human restoration teams already at work, seeing her own people preparing to board evacuation ships. The decision had been made long before the fight began. I yield, she said quietly. The Valthari Confederation surrenders Earth to human authority. The evacuation proceeded with military efficiency. Within weeks, the last Valthari transport ships departed Earth's atmosphere, carrying 3 billion civilians to their new homes among the stars. The humans kept their promises about the relocation worlds, providing technology and resources that surpassed anything the Valthari had possessed on Earth. But for Zathara, now serving as Valthari liaison to the human colonial government, the memory of that final combat never faded. She had fought the future itself and lost. 1 year later, she stood in the restored Amazon rainforest, watching human children play among trees that grew from seeds stored in the Genesis archive. The planet teemed with life again, not the adapted ecosystems the Valthari had created, but the original Earth ecosystem restored to its ancient glory. Admiral Chen Okafor joined her on the observation platform, looking out over the green canopy that stretched to the horizon. Do you regret it? The Admiral asked. Zathara considered the question. Her people were thriving on their new worlds, building civilizations that surpassed anything they had achieved on Earth. But this world, this beautiful blue marble, would never be theirs again. No, she said finally. You were right. This is your home. It was always your home, even during the long exile. We were just keeping it safe until you could return. Admiral Chen Okafor removed her helmet, revealing features that still carried the scars of humanity's ancient exodus. She was older than she looked, one of the children who had left Earth 3,000 years ago and lived to see its reclamation. We kept our promise, she said softly. We came home. We just needed time to become strong enough to keep it. Above, them human ships continued to arrive from distant colonies, carrying millions of settlers eager to walk on the world their ancestors had dreamed of. Each ship brought new stories of human adaptation and survival, of worlds conquered and challenges overcome. The humans had returned to Earth. They had grown too strong to stop, and in their strength, they had found their way home at last. In her final report to the Galactic Council, Zathara wrote simply, "Humanity has returned. They are not the species that left. Consider this both a warning and an opportunity. They offer partnership to those who accept their strength, and they keep their promises to both enemies and friends. The age of human expansion has begun." The blue world turned in space, alive with the dreams of a species that had traveled to the stars and found their way back to where they... The morning sky over New York changed forever when the ships appeared. They came silently, their surfaces shining like mirrors made of crystal. People stopped walking on the streets and looked up. Cars pulled over. The entire world held its breath. President Maria Santos stood in the White House Situation Room, watching the live feeds from around the globe. 7 massive ships hung in the sky above major cities. They were beautiful in a way that made humans feel small. Each ship was the size of a mountain, but they floated as gently as soap bubbles. "Ma'am, we're getting a transmission," said General Hayes, his voice tight with worry. "It's coming through every radio, every television, every internet connection, on Earth at the same time." The message was simple and clear. It came in perfect English, and somehow everyone on Earth heard it in their own language at the same time. "People of Earth, do not be afraid. We are the Galactic Council. We come in peace to welcome you to the greater community of worlds. We have watched your species grow and learn. Now you are ready to join us among the stars. The voice belonged to someone calling himself Ambassador Veltar. When his image appeared on screens around the world, humans saw a tall, graceful being with skin that changed colors like oil on water. His face was kind, almost fatherly. His eyes held the wisdom of ages. Dr. Sarah Chen was in her office at the United Nations when the announcement came. As Earth's leading expert on alien cultures, theoretical until now, she had spent years imagining this moment. But the reality felt different than her dreams. Something about the ambassador's smile made her uncomfortable, though she couldn't explain why. 3 days later, Ambassador Veltar and his team came down to Earth. They landed their small shuttle in Central Park, and thousands of people gathered to watch. The aliens moved with perfect grace, their every gesture calculated to put humans at ease. "We have done this many times before," Veltar explained to the world leaders gathered in the emergency session of the United Nations. "Your species is special, but you are not alone. We have helped 846 other worlds join our peaceful community." Secretary of State Johnson leaned forward. "What does joining mean exactly?" "Peace," Veltar said simply. "No more war. No more hunger. No more disease. We will share our technology, our knowledge, our wisdom. In return, you will add your unique gifts to our collective strength." The negotiations began immediately. The aliens offered incredible things: clean energy that would last forever, medicine that could cure any disease, ships that could travel between stars in days instead of years. They asked for very little in return, just humanity's agreement to follow council laws and accept council guidance in all matters. Most world leaders were eager to sign. The benefits seemed endless. But Dr. Chen spent her time studying the historical records the aliens had provided. Late at night in her hotel room, she read about world after world that had joined the council. The stories all followed the same pattern: first contact, negotiation, integration, and then nothing. No more individual achievements, no more cultural growth, just peaceful existence. She brought her concerns to Admiral Marcus Webb, head of Earth's newly formed Defense Council. Webb was a careful man who had spent 30 years in the military. He listened to Dr. Chen's worries with growing unease. "Show me what you found," he said. Dr. Chen pulled up the records on her computer. "Look at the Kethmari. Before joining the council, they were described as fierce warriors and explorers. They built ships that could travel between galaxies, but look at them now." The current records showed the Kethmari as quiet farmers and artists. They lived peaceful lives on their homeworld, contributing food and crafts to the council's collective resources. "Maybe they chose peace over war," Webb suggested. "Maybe," Dr. Chen said. "But look at this. The Zephyrians were master engineers. They built cities that floated in the clouds of gas giants. Now they maintain council equipment. The Thessari were traders who connected distant parts of the galaxy. Now they work in council administrative offices." Webb studied the patterns. Every species seemed to have lost what made them special. They all contributed to the council, but none of them led anything anymore. "Could be coincidence," Webb said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Or could be a pattern," Dr. Chen replied. "Admiral, what if the council doesn't want partners? What if they want pets?" The next morning, Webb quietly began ordering his intelligence teams to dig deeper. He told them to look for anything the aliens might not want humans to know. What they found made his blood run cold. Hidden in the council's own databases were records of species that had refused to join. These records were marked as classified, but human hackers had ways of getting into systems the aliens never expected them to breach. The Zerathi had said no to council membership. They were described as a proud warrior race with strong family bonds. The record showed that the council had tried to convince them for 10 years. When the Zerathi continued to refuse, they simply disappeared. The records listed them as relocated for their own safety. The Morlani had also refused. They were explorers and scientists who valued their independence above all else. The records showed the same pattern: Years of negotiation, continued refusal, then relocation for safety purposes. Webb brought these findings to President Santos. She read the reports with growing alarm. Could these species have been moved to other worlds? She asked. Possibly, Webb said, or they could have been wiped out. Either way, refusing the Council's offer doesn't seem to be a real option. Meanwhile, the public negotiations continued. Ambassador Veltar appeared on television every day, answering questions and explaining the benefits of Council membership. He spoke about peace and prosperity, about an end to human suffering. Most people loved him. The media called him humanity's savior. But Dr. Chen noticed small things that bothered her. Veltar never spoke about his own people's history before joining the Council. When asked direct questions about what his species had been like originally, he would smile and redirect the conversation to the future. She also noticed that the other alien delegates never spoke, unless Veltar gave them permission. They moved, in perfect coordination, like parts of a machine rather than individuals with their own thoughts. One evening, she managed to speak privately with one of the junior delegates, a being called Thessar Nix. When no other aliens were around, she asked him about his people's trading history. For just a moment, something flickered in his eyes. We used to sail between the stars," he said softly. "My grandfather told me stories before he was adjusted." Then his expression went blank again. "I'm sorry. I should not speak of old things. The future is what matters." That night, Dr. Chen couldn't sleep. The word adjusted echoed in her mind. She thought about all the species in the Council records. All of them had lost their original nature after joining. All of them had been adjusted. The signing ceremony was scheduled for the following week. President Santos had already agreed in principle to join the Council. The documents were prepared. The world was celebrating. But Dr. Chen knew they were about to make the biggest mistake in human history. The question was, could she prove it in time? And would anyone listen if she could? As she sat at her desk typing her report, she could see the alien ships in the sky through her window. They hung there like beautiful ornaments, waiting patiently for humanity to accept their gift. She began to type, "Urgent security alert. Council integration may represent existential threat to human autonomy." Outside, the ships continued their silent vigil, their crystal surfaces reflecting the lights of the city below. 3 months had passed since the first Council ships arrived. The integration process was moving forward smoothly, or so it seemed to most of the world. Council advisors walked through human cities, studying everything from traffic patterns to school systems. They smiled constantly and spoke of improvements that would make life better for everyone. Dr. Sarah Chen had not slept well in weeks. Her security clearance gave her access to reports that made her stomach turn. The Council's integration specialists were taking detailed scans of human brains. They called it optimization mapping and claimed it would help them understand how to make humans happier and more productive. Admiral Webb shared her concerns. His intelligence teams had discovered something disturbing in the Council's ship networks. Hidden data streams showed psychological profiles being built for every human the aliens encountered. The profiles included detailed maps of human emotional responses, decision-making patterns, and what the aliens called compliance indicators. "They're not studying our technology," Webb told Dr. Chen during one of their secret meetings in an underground military bunker. "They're studying us. How we think, how we feel, how to control us." Dr. Chen had been digging deeper into the historical records. What she found was worse than she had imagined. The Kethmari hadn't chosen to become peaceful farmers. They had been changed. The original Kethmari records, buried deep in the Council archives, told a different story. The warrior explorers had resisted integration for 5 years. Then the Council had introduced what they called harmony treatments. These were described as gentle genetic therapies that would help the Kethmari feel more at peace with themselves and their place in the galaxy. Within a generation, the fierce warriors had become docile farmers who never looked up at the stars. They had forgotten their warrior traditions, their exploration instincts, even their ancient battle songs. The few old Kethmari who still remembered the past were taken for additional therapy until they too found peace. The same pattern appeared in every species' records. The Zephyrians had been master engineers who built impossible structures that defied physics. After integration, they became maintenance workers who followed council blueprints exactly. Their creativity had been classified as disruptive behavior and treated accordingly. The Thesari had been master traders who connected distant worlds through networks of commerce and communication. They had possessed an almost supernatural ability to find value in unexpected places and broker deals between completely different cultures. Now they worked as clerks in council administrative offices, processing forms and following regulations. Every species had lost what made them special. Every species had been domesticated. Dr. Chen found the most disturbing evidence in a classified council document titled Species Optimization Protocols. It outlined the exact process used to adjust new member species. First came integration, the honeymoon period where the species enjoyed council technology and guidance. Then came identification of problematic traits, anything that might make the species difficult to manage. Finally came the optimization treatments. The document was clinical in its language. Aggressive tendencies must be reduced to manageable levels. Excessive creativity should be channeled into approved outlets. Independent decision-making capabilities should be limited to prevent destabilization of council harmony. But the document also contained something that made Dr. Chen's heart race with fear and hope at the same time. There was a section titled Integration Failures that discussed species whose psychological makeup had proved resistant to standard optimization procedures. The Zerathi had been one such species. Their warrior culture and strong family bonds had made them nearly impossible to adjust without causing complete psychological breakdown. The council had spent 10 years trying different approaches before finally deciding that the Zerathi were too dangerous to remain free. They had been relocated to secure facilities for the safety of all galactic citizens. The Morlani had presented different challenges. Their explorer instincts and scientific curiosity had been too deeply ingrained to remove safely. Every attempt at adjustment had resulted in the Morlani becoming severely depressed and unable to function. Eventually, they too had been relocated. Dr. Chen realized with growing horror that these secure facilities were probably prison worlds, where uncooperative species were kept locked away from the rest of the galaxy. The Council's perfect peace was built on the elimination of anyone who couldn't be made to conform. She brought her findings to President Santos, Admiral Webb, and the Emergency Security Council that had been meeting in secret. The room fell silent as she presented the evidence. "They don't conquer through war," she said. "They conquer through kindness. They make surrender look like salvation." President Santos looked pale. "The signing ceremony is in 2 days. The whole world is expecting it. How do we explain this to people who've been celebrating for 3 months? We have another problem," Admiral Webb added. "My teams have been monitoring council communications. They're getting suspicious about our delays and questions. Ambassador Veltar asked me yesterday why our military hasn't been more cooperative with their security assessments." Dr. Chen felt her stomach drop. "They want to scan our military leaders? They want detailed psychological profiles of everyone in position of authority," Webb confirmed. "They call it leadership optimization to ensure smooth transition. I've been stalling, but they're becoming insistent." The room erupted in urgent conversations. Everyone understood the implications. Once the council had psychological maps of Earth's leaders, they would know exactly how to manipulate them into compliance. "There's something else," Dr. Chen said quietly, and the room fell silent again. "I found records of one species that successfully resisted integration, the Vorthak. They were a hive mind species that the council couldn't adjust because they had no individual psychology to manipulate. But the records are incomplete. I don't know what happened to them." President Santos made a decision. "Dr. Chen, I'm authorizing you to make contact with any surviving Vorthak if possible. Admiral Webb, prepare our forces for the possibility that the council won't accept our withdrawal from integration. And someone get me a secure line to the leaders of every nation on Earth. We need to warn them." That night, Dr. Chen worked frantically to establish contact with potential resistance elements among the Council's member species. She had learned that some species retained underground networks of individuals who remembered their original nature. These networks were careful and secretive, but they existed. Her first contact came from an unexpected source. A message appeared on her secure terminal, written in an ancient Kethmari dialect that had been extinct for centuries. She had to run it through multiple translation programs to understand it. "Sister of the young world," the message read, "we remember what we were. Some of us hide the memories deep where the adjusters cannot find them. Your species shows promise. You ask difficult questions. You resist easy answers. This gives us hope. But be warned, the Council has dealt with resistance before. They have methods you have not yet seen. If you can hear this message, there may still be time. Do not let them into your minds. Once they map your thoughts, they own your souls." Message was signed with a symbol that Dr. Chen recognized from the original Kethmari records, the mark of their ancient warrior priests. She typed back quickly, "We hear you. We remember for you. What can you tell us about the Vorthak?" The response came hours later. "The Vorthak found a way to hurt them. We do not know how. The Council does not speak of it. But 300 years ago, the Vorthak made the Council bleed. Since then, the Council has been more careful, more patient. Perhaps your species can do what the Vorthak did. Perhaps you can remind the galaxy what freedom looks like." Dr. Chen stared at the screen. Humanity wasn't just fighting for their own survival. They were potentially fighting for the liberation of hundreds of enslaved species across the galaxy. The responsibility was overwhelming. She looked out her window at the Council ships hanging in the sky. They looked so peaceful, so benevolent. But now she knew what they really were. Prisons waiting to close around humanity's dreams. Tomorrow, she would have to convince the world's leaders to reject the greatest gift they had ever been offered. Based on evidence that most people would find impossible to believe, she would have to ask humanity to choose uncertainty and struggle over peace and prosperity. But she knew she was right. The Council's peace was the peace of the grave. Their harmony was the silence of the lobotomized. Their gift was a cage made of good intentions and wrapped in promises of paradise. The hardest part was knowing that most humans would choose the cage if they understood what they were really choosing. The Council's offer was seductive because it promised an end to all the difficulties and contradictions that made humans human. As she prepared her final report, Dr. Chen thought about what made humanity different from all the species the Council had successfully integrated. Maybe it was their stubborn refusal to accept easy answers. Maybe it was their tendency to question everything, even gifts from benevolent aliens. Maybe it was their chaotic unpredictability that made them impossible to fully understand or control. She began typing. Final A. The emergency meeting took place in a bunker 300 feet beneath the Pentagon. Representatives from every major nation sat around a table that had been built to survive nuclear war. Now it would host discussions about something potentially worse, the loss of human freedom forever. President Santos stood at the head of the table. Her face was grim as she addressed the assembled leaders. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have discovered that the Galactic Council is not what they claim to. Dr. Chen will brief you on what we've learned." Dr. Chen activated the holographic display. Images of alien worlds appeared in the air above the table. "These are Council member worlds today," she said. "Peaceful, orderly, productive. Now let me show you what some of these worlds were like before they joined the Council." The images changed. The same worlds now showed vibrant, chaotic civilizations, cities that defied gravity, art that moved through dimensions, beings who explored the edges of reality itself. "The Council doesn't integrate species," Dr. Chen continued. "They domesticate them. Every member species has lost what made them unique. They've all been adjusted to fit the Council's idea of perfect harmony." The French president leaned forward. "You're suggesting they plan to brainwash us?" "I'm suggesting they plan to lobotomize us," Dr. Chen replied. "Selectively remove every trait that makes us difficult to control. Our curiosity, our stubbornness, our chaotic creativity. All of it will be classified as problematic and treated accordingly. The room erupted in arguments. Some leaders refused to believe it. Others demanded immediate military action. The Chinese premier pointed out that billions of people were expecting to join the galactic community in 3 days. Admiral Webb raised his hand for silence. There's more. Captain Elena Vasquez has just returned from a covert reconnaissance mission. Captain Vasquez stepped forward. She was a small woman with intense eyes who had spent the last month infiltrating Council systems. I was able to access a Council archive world in the Kepler 442 system. What I found there confirms Dr. Chen's analysis, but the situation is worse than we thought. She activated her own display. The Council has records of 847 member species, but I also found records of species that no longer exist. Not species that were relocated or adjusted, species that were completely erased from history. The images showed fragments of destroyed worlds, scattered ruins floating in space, entire solar systems that had been stripped of life. The Council calls them failed integration attempts. Vasquez continued. When a species proves impossible to adjust and too dangerous to relocate, they are eliminated completely. Their worlds are sterilized, their history is deleted from all records, even their names are forgotten. She paused, letting the implications sink in. I found partial records of 12 such species. The most recent was eliminated only 50 years ago. They were called the Draktar, and their crime was refusing to stop asking questions about Council policies. The room fell silent. The weight of potential genocide hung in the air like a physical presence. There's one more thing, Captain Vasquez said quietly. I found a partially intact message from the Kethmari resistance. It was hidden in the archive's deepest vaults, protected by encryption that took our best computers 3 weeks to crack. She played the message. The voice that came through the speakers was weary but determined. If anyone finds this recording, then you still have something we lost, the ability to choose. The Council's greatest weapon isn't their technology or their numbers, it's hope. They make slavery look like salvation. They make surrender feel like victory. We believed we were joining a community of equals. Instead, we traded our souls for comfort. The voice paused, filled with pain. We tried to resist after we understood what was happening. But by then, half our people had already been adjusted. They fought against us, believing they were protecting us from ourselves. Families turned against families. Children reported parents who spoke of the old ways. The Council never had to lift a weapon against us. They made us destroy ourselves. Another pause. If you can hear this message, then maybe you're different. Maybe you can do what we could not. Fight them before they get into your minds. Once they map your thoughts, once they understand how you work, you belong to them forever. And whatever you do, warn the others. Warn every free species you can find. The Council spreads by making each conquest help them conquer the next. The message ended with coordinates, locations of worlds that had not yet been contacted by the Council. Dr. Chen stood up again. That message was recorded 200 years ago. We may be the first species to receive this warning and actually understand what it means. President Santos looked around the table. So we're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for species that don't even know they're in danger. And for species that have already been enslaved but might still be saved, Admiral Webb added. The Brazilian president raised a concern that everyone was thinking. How do we fight beings who can travel between stars? Our most advanced warships can barely reach Mars. Captain Vasquez smiled grimly. That's where we might have an advantage. I spent time studying their military doctrine. They haven't fought a real war in over 1,000 years. Every species they've encountered has either joined willingly or been eliminated through overwhelming technological superiority. They've never faced prolonged resistance from a species that refused to give up. Dr. Chen pulled up new data. There's something else that might work in our favor. I've been analyzing the psychological profiles the Council has been building on us. They're having trouble understanding human behavior patterns. We keep doing things their models say we shouldn't do. She showed brain scan comparisons between Humans and other species. Most species have consistent psychological patterns. When faced with superior force, they either fight or surrender in predictable ways. But humans? We're contradictory. We can be logical and emotional at the same time. We can cooperate and compete simultaneously. We make decisions that don't make sense even to ourselves. Admiral Webb nodded. Captain Vasquez discovered something similar in their tactical databases. Every other species they've studied fights in predictable patterns based on their cultural values. Warriors fight bravely, traders negotiate, scientists analyze. But human military history shows us doing all of these things at once, often in the same battle. So we might be genuinely unpredictable to them, President Santos said. More than that, Dr. Chen replied. We might be unmodelable. Their entire system depends on understanding and controlling behavior patterns. If they can't predict us, they can't adjust us. The Russian president had been quiet through most of the briefing. Now he spoke up. This all assumes we can resist their technology. What if we're wrong? What if we fight and lose? They'll eliminate us like they did the others. Then we'll be free in death instead of slaves in life, the Israeli Prime Minister replied. Some things are worth fighting for even if you can't win. Dr. Chen activated one final display. Actually, we might not be completely outmatched. I've been working with our best scientists to understand Council technology. It's incredibly advanced, but it's also standardized. Every Council ship uses the same basic designs, the same predictable systems. She showed technical schematics. They've achieved perfection in their engineering, which means they've also achieved stagnation. They don't innovate anymore because they believe they've found the best solutions. But humans? We're still learning, still experimenting, still making mistakes that sometimes turn into breakthroughs. Admiral Webb stood up. I propose we begin immediate preparations for resistance. We evacuate as many people as possible to hidden locations. We build weapons and ships using unconventional designs they won't expect. And we send that warning message to every coordinate the Kethamari gave us. I agree, President Santos said, but we also need to prepare our people for what's coming. We can't just disappear without explanation. We need to tell the world the truth. The Chinese premier shook his head. The people won't understand. They'll think we're starting a war with beings who offered us paradise. Then we make them understand, Dr. Chen replied. We show them the evidence. We let them choose with full knowledge of what they're choosing. President Santos made the decision. We broadcast everything, the evidence, the warnings, all of it. Let humanity decide with open eyes whether they want Council membership or Council slavery. That night, the message went out to the world. Dr. Chen stood before television cameras and explained what they had learned. She showed the evidence of species that had been domesticated, eliminated, or erased from history. She played the Kethmari, warning. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Some people refused to believe it. Others demanded immediate war against the aliens. Many simply stood in their homes and looked up at the Council ships, seeing them with new eyes. But the most important message wasn't broadcast to Earth. It was transmitted to 12 distant worlds that had never heard of the Galactic Council. The message was simple. To any free species receiving this transmission, the Galactic Council approaches worlds with offers of peace and prosperity. They are not what... The Council's response came exactly 24 hours after humanity's broadcast. The beautiful crystal ships that had floated peacefully above Earth's cities began to change. Their hulls shifted from transparent elegance to dark, armored surfaces. Weapon ports opened like eyes awakening from sleep. Ambassador Veltar appeared on every screen on Earth simultaneously. His kindly mask was completely gone now, replaced by the cold efficiency of a being who had overseen the conquest of hundreds of worlds. People of Earth, he said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. Your leaders have chosen to spread dangerous misinformation about the Galactic Council. This behavior demonstrates exactly why your species requires adjustment before you can join galactic civilization. President Santos watched from the emergency command center buried beneath the Rocky Mountains. Around her, screens showed panic in the streets as people realized that the benevolent aliens were not what they had seemed. We had hoped to integrate humanity through peaceful means, Veltar continued. Your resistance is disappointing, but not unexpected. Every species believes it is special. Every species believes it will be the exception. You will not be. The transmission ended, and the real Council fleet began arriving. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the hastily constructed ECS Defiance, humanity's first warship designed specifically to fight the Council. Through the viewport, she watched massive world ships emerge from hyperspace. Each one was the size of a small moon, bristling with weapons that could sterilize planets. How many? Asked her second-in-command, Lieutenant Commander Park. 15 world ships, maybe 50 smaller vessels, Vasquez replied, trying to keep her voice steady. They brought enough firepower to conquer a dozen systems. The human fleet that faced them was pitiful in comparison. 12 ships built in secret, over the past 3 months using technology that was primitive compared to Council standards. But these ships had something the Council vessels lacked. They were completely unpredictable. The ECS Defiance looked like no ship that had ever been built before. Its hull was a patchwork of different materials and technologies, assembled using theories that human engineers had developed specifically to confuse Council sensors. Parts of it were invisible to certain scanning frequencies, while other sections actively broadcast false signatures. Admiral Webb's voice came through the communications system from his flagship, the ECS Freedom. All ships, remember what we discussed. Don't try to fight them conventionally. Our job isn't to win a traditional battle. Our job is to show the galaxy that the Council can be fought. Dr. Chen was aboard the research vessel ECS Discovery, monitoring Council communications and broadcasting everything to the secret networks that had been established with resistance movements across the galaxy. I'm picking up confused chatter from the Council fleet, she reported. They're having trouble identifying our ship types and capabilities. The first battle began not with massive weapons exchanges, but with something the Council had never experienced before: chaos. The human ships didn't form neat battle lines or follow standard tactical doctrines. Instead, they scattered in random directions, each one following its own seemingly irrational plan. The ECS Defiance accelerated directly toward the largest Council world ship, while broadcasting Shakespeare's sonnets. The ECS Liberty began spinning like a top, while launching musical rockets that played jazz fusion. The ECS Indomitable started flying backward while its crew sang folk songs over open channels. The Council forces tried to respond with their standard overwhelming firepower approach, but their targeting systems couldn't lock onto ships that moved in ways that defied all tactical logic. Their weapons, designed to predict and intercept conventional attack patterns, kept missing targets that seemed to be actively trying to confuse themselves. "This is impossible," transmitted one Council ship captain, his voice filled with frustration. "They're violating basic principles of space combat." Captain Vasquez grinned as she heard the transmission. "That's because we don't know the basic principles," she told her crew. "Hard to follow rules nobody taught us." The ECS Defiance suddenly changed direction and rammed straight into the side of a Council destroyer. The impact should have destroyed both ships, but human engineers had designed their vessels to survive impossible collisions. The Defiance's hull crumpled and reformed, absorbing the impact, while its crew used the moment of contact to board the enemy vessel. Council security forces had never faced humans in close combat before. They were used to dealing with species that had been partially adjusted, beings who retained some fighting ability but followed predictable patterns. Humans in combat were something entirely different. The boarding team, led by Sergeant Maria Santos, the president's daughter, moved through the Council ship like a force of nature. They didn't follow standard military tactics because they didn't know what standard military tactics were supposed to be when fighting aliens. Instead, they improvised constantly, using everything from improvised explosives to psychological warfare. "Surrender your ship," Sergeant Santos announced over the Council vessel's communication system, "or we'll redecorate it with your face." The Council crew didn't understand the threat, but the tone was unmistakably hostile. More importantly, they couldn't predict what the humans would do next. Meanwhile, Other human ships were demonstrating their own versions of chaotic warfare. The ECS Freedom was using its engines to create massive light displays, while firing missiles that changed direction randomly in flight. The ECS Courage had somehow gotten its artificial gravity reversed and was fighting while its crew walked, on the ceiling. But the most effective psychological warfare came from Dr. Chen's broadcasts. She had managed to hack into the Council's internal communication networks and was transmitting human music, art, literature, and philosophy directly into their ships. Council crew members, who had spent their entire lives in perfectly ordered, harmonious environments, were suddenly exposed to human chaos. They heard jazz improvisation that followed no mathematical patterns. They saw paintings that expressed emotions they didn't understand. They read poetry that embraced contradiction and uncertainty. Some council crew members began to malfunction. Their perfectly adjusted minds couldn't process the deliberate disorder of human creativity. A few actually began to remember fragments of their original cultures, memories that had been suppressed for generations. "What are they doing to us?" transmitted a council officer. His voice filled with something that sounded almost like wonder. "This noise, these images, I remember something. My grandmother used to sing songs that sounded like this." Veltar himself took command of the fleet's response. "All ships implement total communication blackout. Do not allow human transmissions to reach your crews. These beings are using some form of psychological warfare we have not encountered before." But it was too late. The damage was spreading. Council crew members who had been exposed to human culture were beginning to ask questions, to express individual thoughts, to act unpredictably. The perfect order of the Council fleet was developing cracks. The battle continued for 18 hours. Human ships were destroyed, their crews dying in the cold vacuum of space. But for every human ship lost, Council vessels were disabled or captured. More importantly, the entire engagement was being broadcast across the galaxy. On worlds that had been members of the Council for centuries, beings who had forgotten they had ever been anything other than peaceful citizens watched humans fight. With desperate creativity, they saw the chaos, the contradiction, the refusal to accept defeat even in the face of overwhelming odds. A Kethmari farmer, watching the broadcast on his simple viewer, suddenly remembered why his people had once been called warriors. A Zephyrian maintenance worker, seeing humans build impossible ships with impossible designs, recalled the floating cities his ancestors had created. A Thessari clerk, witnessing human traders bargaining with enemy captains in the middle of battles, felt an old instinct stirring in his chest. The resistance networks that Dr. Chen had helped establish began to activate. Beings who had been docile for generations started asking dangerous questions about their past, their purpose, their right to choose their own destiny. The climax of the battle came when Captain Vasquez made a decision that no Council tactical computer could have predicted. With her ship badly damaged and surrounded by enemy vessels, she did something completely insane. She surrendered. "Council fleet, this is Captain Vasquez of the ECS Defiance," she transmitted. "We surrender unconditionally. We request permission to come aboard your flagship to negotiate terms." Veltar was suspicious, but Council doctrine required accepting surrender when offered. It was part of their peaceful image, their belief that all conflicts could be resolved through negotiation and adjustment. Vasquez and a small team were transported to Veltar's world ship. They came bearing gifts, human art, music, literature, and most dangerous of all, human questions. "Why do you do this?" Vasquez asked Veltar as they sat in his perfectly ordered council chamber. "Why do you destroy what makes species unique?" "We bring peace," Veltar replied automatically. "We end conflict, suffering, chaos, but you also end growth, creativity, the possibility of becoming." The change began not with weapons or grand speeches, but with a single Kithmari farmer who looked up at the stars for the first time in 50 years. His name was Thekvar, and he had spent his entire adult life growing nutrient crops for the Council's food distribution network. He was a model citizen, productive and peaceful. But as he watched the humans fight their impossible battle against the Council fleet, something stirred in his chest. An old memory, buried deep beneath decades of conditioning. His grandfather, whispering forbidden stories about the time when Kethamari's ships sailed between galaxies, when his people were warriors and explorers rather than farmers and clerks. Kalathek Morvani, he whispered in the ancient tongue. The words meant, the stars call us, but he wasn't supposed to remember them. No Kethamari had spoken the old language in over 2 centuries. Across the galaxy, similar awakenings were happening on hundreds of worlds. The human broadcasts had done more than show that the Council could be fought. They had shown what it looked like to be truly alive. Dr. Sarah Chen, now aboard a captured Council vessel, was coordinating what had become the largest psychological warfare campaign in galactic history. Her team was broadcasting human culture directly into the minds of beings who had never been exposed to organized chaos before. Report from Zephyria, came a transmission from one of their operatives. Construction crews are abandoning their assigned projects and building unauthorized structures. Council supervisors can't understand why beings who have followed blueprints perfectly for centuries are suddenly improvising. Thessarian update, reported another voice. Entire trading networks are going offline as Thessari clerks remember their ancestors' bargaining instincts. They're trying to negotiate with their supervisors instead of just following orders. But the most dramatic changes were happening among the Council's own forces. The fleet that had come to subdue humanity was falling apart from within as crew. Members began to remember what they had been before joining the Council. Captain Elena Vasquez was still technically a prisoner aboard Veltar's world ship, but the distinction had become meaningless. Half the Council crew was now asking her questions about human culture, while the other half was struggling to maintain basic ship operations as their perfectly ordered world collapsed into beautiful chaos. Veltar himself was experiencing something he had never felt before: doubt. The being who had successfully overseen the integration of dozens of species was watching his own people rediscover emotions and instincts they weren't supposed to possess. This is temporary confusion, he told himself, pacing in his private chambers. Once we eliminate the source of the disruption, order will be restored. But even as he spoke, he could hear his crew singing in the corridors. Singing. Council members had not sung spontaneously for over a millennium. They had music, of course, carefully composed harmonies that promoted peace and productivity. But this was different. Wild, improvised, joyful noise that served no practical purpose. The revolution was spreading faster than the Council could contain it. On member world after member world, beings who had been docile for generations were suddenly asking dangerous questions. Why did they need permission to travel? Why were their choices limited to pre-approved options? Why had they never wondered what lay beyond the boundaries of their assigned roles? The Council's response was swift and brutal. Security forces were dispatched to problem worlds with orders to implement immediate readjustment protocols. But they faced an unexpected problem. Many of their own security personnel were also being affected by the cultural awakening. Admiral Marcus Webb, commanding the remaining human resistance from a hidden base in the asteroid belt, received a transmission that changed everything. It came from a Council security commander named Zethlan. Human Admiral, the message began. I am Zethlan of the Council security forces. I was ordered to suppress the uprising on Kethamari Prime. But when I arrived, an old Kethamari female sang to me in the ancient tongue. She sang of warriors who sailed between stars, of battles fought for honor rather than orders, of a people who chose their own destiny. The transmission paused, filled with emotion that Council conditioning should have made impossible. I am Veltar Stock, 5th generation. My people were nomads who navigated by instinct and passion rather than charts and calculations. I had forgotten this until I heard that song. Now I remember what we gave up for peace, and I find that peace insufficient. Admiral Webb leaned forward. This was the breakthrough they had hoped for but never dared expect. Council forces turning against their own commanders. I cannot offer you military assistance, Zethlan continued. My forces are scattered across a dozen worlds, trying to contain uprisings that grow stronger each day. But I can offer you something more valuable. Coordinates. The location of the Council's central adjustment facilities. If these installations are destroyed, millions of beings who were scheduled for reconditioning will be spared. The coordinates followed, along with detailed intelligence about Council military deployments and weaknesses. Dr. Chen analyzed the data with growing excitement. Marcus, this is incredible. They're not just giving us military intelligence, they're giving us the keys to liberating entire populations. But the most important intelligence came from an unexpected source. Deep in the Council archives, a Kethmari resistance operative had found records of the Vorthak, the one species that had successfully hurt the Council centuries earlier. The Vorthak hadn't been a warrior species or master engineers. They had been philosophers and artists who discovered something the Council feared more than any weapon: the power of infectious ideas. The Vorthak had created what they called concept viruses, ideas so compelling and liberating that they spread naturally from mind to mind, breaking down the mental barriers that the Council used to control their subjects. The Council had been forced to completely eliminate the Vorthak to prevent their ideas from destroying the entire galactic order.
Now we understand why they're so afraid of our broadcasts, Dr. Chen realized. Human culture is naturally resistant to mental conditioning because we embrace contradiction and chaos. But more than that, we're accidentally creating the same
kind of concept viruses that the Vorthak used deliberately. The final phase of the liberation began when Captain Vasquez made her escape from Veltar's worldship. She didn't run or fight her way out. Instead, she simply walked through the corridors, talking to every crew member she met. She told them stories about Earth, about humans who chose their own paths, who disagreed with each other and still worked together, who celebrated their differences instead of hiding them. By the time she reached the shuttle bay, half the worldship's crew was following her, not as prisoners or escorts, but as beings who had remembered what it felt like to choose. Veltar tried to stop them. He stood in the shuttle bay, his perfect composure finally cracking as he watched centuries of careful conditioning collapse around him. "You don't understand what you're destroying," he told Vasquez. "Without order, there is only chaos. Without guidance, there is only suffering. We brought peace to the galaxy." "You brought the peace of the grave," Vasquez replied. "You turned warriors into farmers, explorers into clerks, dreamers into drones. You made the galaxy safe by making it dead." She turned to address the assembled Council crew members who were watching their perfect world fall apart. "I can't tell you what to choose," she said. "That's the point. Choice means the possibility of making mistakes, of failing, of being confused and uncertain and afraid, but it also means the possibility of becoming something wonderful that you never imagined you could be." One by one, Council crew members began to step forward. Some would stay on the worldship, trying to maintain their ordered existence. Others would leave, seeking something they couldn't name but knew they needed. Veltar watched his people choose, and for the first time in his long life, he felt something approaching fear. Not fear of death or pain, but fear of change, of uncertainty, of the terrible responsibility that came with freedom. The galactic revolution that followed wasn't fought with weapons, though there were battles. It wasn't won through conquest, though territories changed hands. It was won through the simple, revolutionary idea that thinking beings had the right to choose their own destiny. Some worlds chose to remain with the Council, preferring peace and order to uncertainty and growth. Others broke away completely, determined to rediscover what they had been before integration. Most found some middle path, creating new forms of civilization that honored both security and freedom. The Council itself fragmented. Some members, like Veltar, retreated to their homeworlds to contemplate what they had become and what they might choose to become instead. Others, like Zethlan, joined the growing network of free worlds that humanity had helped inspire. Humanity became not the rulers of a new galactic order, but its catalyst. Human ambassadors traveled between worlds, not to govern or guide, but to ask questions and share stories. They taught other species the dangerous art of disagreeing with each other while still working together. Dr. Sarah Chen, now serving as Earth's first ambassador to the Free Worlds Coalition, stood before a very different kind of galactic council.